nothing to you?
It symbolizes me as a country that this is, but there's nothing. The flag touches me. It doesn't. I see nothing wrong with that flag, Benny. If that flag was banned by ANC or by EFF or by any party or ACT or MK, were you going to talk racism?
If the flag was what?
If that flag was banned by EFF, MK, or whatever party, were you going to shout racism?
I don't think what is being said is only an issue of racism.
Those
Benny.
people who are calling, they're talking about it because they've never even listened to the message of that thing. That flag resurfaced.
Okay.
It was banned and it resurfaced as new. Because you know what? South Africa, what do you know? What is on your tongue is racism. Anything is racism because you cannot do things for yourself.
Okay. All right. Benny, we're going to have to leave it there. Benny
Thank
out
you.
in Pretoria, yeah. And what of course is also quite significant for me out of what Benny has said is the fact that, the flag is just a symbol, but he doesn't have any further association with it than that. So whether it's burning, whether it's not burning, it's neither here nor there. Richard, in Gqeberha, you also want to talk about the flag.
Cathy, good morning. I knew that I'm going to have an opportunity to engage with you. One, let's start here, quick one, Cathy. I want to call out all the media houses and media practitioners. That includes papers and paid TV and not paying TV. You guys are not telling us, I'm including you, Cathy, because I know we're going to engage on this issue. You are not telling us that you've been paid for the campaign of the DA, linking it to this advert. It's not about the advert. It's about the campaign, taking DA out into the public.
Richard,
trying to capture their minds.
Richard,
and
tell me about how the media has been paid.
Look, Cathy, probably you know how adverts and the airtime is sold. And now there's a first-stance opposition of buying airspace for the advert, literally. There's a second part, that of buying campaign. Then the campaign simply involves putting that advert in different programs and different presenters like yourselves signing up, but you signed it right in your contract that you signed with SABC, that you will be asked to take part in this campaign. And how do you take part in the campaign? You take part by raising or talking about the issue. That is part of
Richard,
campaign.
what you're saying is just absolute nonsense. It is not true at all. I mean, it is.
I know.
No, Richard.
No.
You know what I find mostly problematic about what you're saying is that you're coming on air and stating what you're saying as if it's fact, and it is simply not true. If you are unclear or you don't know how processes work, ask, and we're more than happy to share insights around it. Yes, all political parties have the opportunity to buy advertising, just as with private companies do, on any platform of their choice. That is something that is managed and handled by the sales department, right? So even you as Richard, let's say, I don't know what you do for a living, but maybe you decide you want to advertise around whatever it is that you're doing. You go to the sales department, they'll be able to help you out. Because we're a public broadcaster, our mandate is also regulated by the BCCSA. So that means that during an election period, you will also, when you hear political adverts, they will be followed by a message that this message is something that has been paid for by the political party in question and does not represent the views of the SABC. That would mean that even if it's playing on the talking point, it does not represent my view. So even the idea that as a journalist, I'm paid to take up and be part of a campaign by a political party, even just the suggestion of it, Richard, is incredibly upsetting.
Okay, Cathy, I knew that we were going to engage on this matter, and you were going to.
No, you didn't come into it with the point with the aim of engaging. You came into it making unfounded and dangerous allegations that are not true, Richard.
No. Thanks, Cathy. I said I knew that you were going to engage. That's what I said right from the beginning, and I accept what you're saying, and we will move on. I hope that we be educated between the difference between the advert and the campaign. But I accept your point, Cathy. If I scratch you or touch you on the wrong side.
Even with the campaign, there is no media house that is paid to talk about a political party.
Okay, no.
I'm saying to you that what you're talking about simply does not exist.
Thanks, Cathy. Let's move to my second point quickly, Cathy. Mr. Khumalo is committing a criminal act. I am hoping that people close to him will advise quickly to retract the letter that it's purported to be written by him. Because, one, he concedes in the very same letter that Mr. Zuma played an intimate role in the establishment of what is called MK as a party. The name itself came from Mr. Zuma. The money for registration came from Mr. Zuma. So this gentleman played an intimate role in the formation of the party. But then Mr. Khumalo handed over the party to the executive, what is known to be the national executive, which we do not know whether it exists or not exists. He wrote a letter to the IEC stating that Mr. Zuma is the leader and should be the face of the party. IEC, to action that, they would have asked for the resolution and the constitution of that party, which is registered. So there's no way now that an individual can come back and reclaim a party that has already been registered. He should take his fight to the High Court, not the IEC.
You know, Richard, I'm very interested to see how the IEC is going to deal with this too, because it seems to me that it is also an issue of process, right? And understanding what happens between party registrations, who actually has the right to deregister parties, especially for parties that are going through internal disputes. The MK is not the first party to undergo this, but of course the IEC will be feeling the pressure in this moment.
No, there's one answer for the IEC. You are knocking on the wrong door. That's what they should be sending him the very letter that he wrote, and the constitution and the resolution and the constitution that he handed over, indicating that Mr. Zuma is the head of the party and the face of the party.
Okay.
But how do we stop the Swart Khefar? Advice to the DA members: just vote for the ANC to stop the collision between the ANC and the EFF and the MK party. You go and vote for the ANC. Bump up the numbers of the ANC beyond 50%. So that there's no opportunity for the ANC to stop coalition.
Well, Richard,
that's the only
Richard,
way for members of the DA to stop this. What is this? Swart Khefar.
Yeah, Richard, the DA will not agree with that suggestion. I think that's why they've come up with the ad in the first place, because they obviously are saying that they're the answer. Mlachawe, you are in Limpopo. Good morning.
Good morning, Cathy. How are you?
I'm well, thank you, Mlachawe. Go for it.
Do you still remember what I said on the 9th of January?
There's no way I remember what you said on the 9th of January, Mlachawe.
You cannot remember because what I say, people they take it for granted.
Mlachawe, do you know how many people I speak to just in a day on this platform?
You know, Cathy, I said on the 9th of January, those people who come here and type dreams saying that the ANC, if they garnered less than 51%, the country is going to be a good country. And I say those people, they are dreaming. Now, I think the DA has vindicated what I said. Because I said those people who are saying that if the ANC becomes less than 51 plus, the ANC is going to be good. They are dreaming because those people, especially those parties, they want to detect. They have realized that they cannot reach 51 plus %, and they think that if they don't reach that percent and ANC don't reach 51 plus, they are going to collude with the EFF and this Zuma's party. So now they are fearing. The fire now is burning them. That's why you see them burning that flag. They have seen that their rocket to the moon will not reach there. I'm telling you, it is going to be a disaster. Yeah, this country is going to be a disaster if the ANC garners less than 51% plus. And I said that there are still those RET forces within the ANC which will try by all means to say that Ramaphosa failed to take the ANC to 51 plus. He must step down so that they can combine with those EFF and the MK, and if they reach 51 two-thirds majority, they are going to change this constitution. Coming to this flag, the DA burning this flag, that is the national symbol. What if the people come to the streets and they remove the DA's posters and burn it, which is important, the national emblem and the DA's posters? I think this DA, what they are doing, they are inciting violence. What are they doing?
Okay, all right, Mlachawe, out in Limpopo. Let's leave it there. I don't know if the DA is inciting violence, if a credible argument could be made to that effect, just watching that flag. But Mlachawe, that's your view. Billy Masha, you're out in Sekhukhune. Good morning.
A very good morning, Sister.
Rona Lekai.
Good. The issue of the flag, I don't think it's got any value to us, particularly as blacks in general and Africans in particular. We are taught now that it represents unity in diversity. It's about one nation. It's not true. Former President Thabo Mbeki told us that we are two nations in this country, one rich and the other poor. Where is the one nation that you are talking about? We don't have one nation in this country. We are two nations, we remain divided, and we remain fighting each other on the basis of benefit. How do we benefit from this new flag, in particular, as Africans? There's no way. We don't have land, we don't have any say, even in the court of law. When you have to go to court, you need money. Only those who have got access to court are those who have got money. And many African people don't have that access to the court, to the justice that they deserve. And I don't know what does that flag mean, really. It is the same flag which was said to be made for 200 million as a monument. For what? When our people are suffering in the streets there. That flag is useless for us. It's got no value to me. It's got no value to you in particular.
So even what the meaning that is embedded in the flag, the green, the yellow, the black, the blue, the red, Billy.
When it rains, there will be something like a rainbow. At least I can teach my child about that thing. What does it mean? Not this flag. It's got no meaning at all. Tell me what meaning does it have to you in particular?
Billy Masha, well, we'll have to leave it there out in Sekhukhune. Yeah, and one would think that, the story of our flag is so powerful, right? Because you've got the green that represents our land, the gold that represents our minerals. But if some people believe that it doesn't mean anything to them, well, they're allowed to have that view. Tabiso in Mpumalanga, good morning.
Yes, Cathy, how are you?
Well, thank you. Go for it.
No, thanks, man. Look, we are simply saying that the split of MK was inevitable, because this is an organization that was formed out of anger. Once you form the organization, you can't say you're not going to have leadership, because it will be free for all. So for the fact that they did not elect anybody as their leader, now you've got this Khumalo guy who's calling himself the president and Zuma calling himself the president. It was inevitable. By the way, the splinter groups or those organizations that are living the ANC will not live forever, because they are formed out of anger. You would go to COPE. COPE would not even come back to parliament. And ESS can give it 15 years. At some point, Julius will have to relinquish power.
And when you remove power, I know that they will be fighting there because everyone will now want to lead. But we are saying our people must not focus on this winter group that are not providing anything. They must focus and vote for the African National Congress. We thank you.
Okay, Thabiso out in Mpumalanga. That's where we'll leave it for this morning. I've noticed that more and more of our listeners, and they're doing it in a very sneaky way. They make their point, and then towards the end of the point, they're like, vote for this party, vote for that party, vote for this party. So, there's some campaigning that people are also trying to sneak in their comments on the open line. We must have a conversation about this. It's 10 o'clock, time for the latest news.
In our top stories, President Ramaphosa sends condolences following George building collapse and City Power's debt threatening Eskom's financial stability. Good morning. President Cyril Ramaphosa has sent his condolences to the family and friends of 5 people killed in an incident in which a building collapsed in George in the Western Cape. 25 people have been removed from the rubble, but 49 others are still unaccounted for. About 75 workers were on site when the building collapsed yesterday afternoon. The presidential spokesperson, Vincent Magwenya.
The President's thoughts are with the families who have lost loved ones, as well as the families of close to 50 people who are trapped in the rubble. President Ramaphosa wishes rescue teams the best as they go about their operations and says investigations into the cause of the incident must aim to bring closure to the community and prevent a repeat of this disaster.
In election-related news, the Electoral Commission is yet to confirm whether it has received the letter that Umkhonto weSizwe Party founder Jabulani Khumalo says he has written to it. In the letter dated the 5th of this month, Khumalo has requested the Commission to urgently remove Jacob Zuma as the face of the party. Khumalo has also placed Zuma on precautionary suspension, citing bringing the party into disrepute. Khumalo's letter comes after his expulsion from the MK party last week, alongside 4 party members. Samkelo Maseko reports.
He continued to say, quote, "In fact, the name of Umkhonto weSizwe was proposed by Mr. Zuma. I was responsible for the registration of the MK party with the Electoral Commission. Mr. Zuma also assisted with raising of the funds for the registration, which was around 705,000 rands. I am not at liberty to name the persons who paid for the registration." So essentially, Mr. Jabulani Khumalo is requesting for former President Jacob Zuma to be removed as the face of the MK party and the president of the MK party to the IEC in a letter that he sent to the IEC and he sent to former President Jacob Zuma.
Meanwhile, there is no sign of MK party members outside the ANC headquarters in Johannesburg. This despite MK party members' plan to descend on Luthuli House after the ANC confirmed Zuma would appear before a disciplinary hearing. However, that disciplinary hearing has been postponed to a date yet to be announced. The ANC says the suspended leader faces 2 charges relating to the contravention of the party's constitution. Zoleka Kodashe reports.
We will be there as far as we're concerned. We're there by invite.
This was a threat made by MK Party spokesperson Ndlamulo Ndlela on Sunday. While there are no party members visible at the ANC's headquarters, a police nyala can be seen stationed outside the building. Apart from that, traffic is flowing while men and women rush to their destinations, oblivious to the warnings of possible demonstrations in support of the MK Party leader.
On to other news. Eskom says City Power in Johannesburg is among the defaulters that are threatening its financial stability. Eskom has confirmed it has taken City Power to court for defaulting to the tune of more than 1 billion rand. Eskom says City Power started defaulting on its payments in October last year. Eskom Gauteng spokesperson Amanda Ngqiti.
Before we get to such extent, We first have quite a number of engagements with the municipalities, but it's really the last resort. We've had engagements with them, we've had dispute meetings with them just to let them know that we're going to be going into this. We've also issued them with the notices of breach prior to us going to submit the application. So there have been several engagements, but unfortunately this has been going on for a while. And if you look at their monthly bill, it's quite high. So it really does put a huge dent on our financial standing.
And finally, Kenyan Olympic champion Eliud Kipchoge says he feared for the lives of his family after a campaign of online abuse wrongly linked him to the death of a fellow Kenyan marathon runner. Kipchoge says shortly after Calvin Kiptum was killed in a car crash in February, stories began appearing online claiming he was somehow responsible. The BBC Celestine Caroni reports.
Kipchoge says when he learned of Kiptum's passing, he mourned his compatriot's death, only to then face a tirade of online abuse. At times tearful, Kipchoge told the BBC he's had to protect his children and loved ones from online threats. He said his mental health has suffered in races, finishing 10th in the Tokyo Marathon, his worst ever position. Now he's calling on social media platforms to act fast and delete accounts which put out false claims in a bid to crack down on online bullying.
Recapping the top story, President Cyril Ramaphosa has sent his condolences to the family and friends of 5 people killed in an incident in which a building collapsed in George in the Western Cape. For SAFM News, I am Anne Musa.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide. Are you blowing your paycheck on car insurance every month? Monica, 39 from Three Rivers, pays just 1,515 Rand a month for her 2018 BMW 320i.
None of the insurance companies has come near to the price I'm paying. I am happy at Outsurance. I'm going nowhere.
SMS out to 30754 now for a quick quote that could save you hundreds every month. You'll also find out about included benefits like panic assistance and help it out 24-hour roadside assistance. Yusuf, 45 from Tegadal, pays just 700 Rand a month for his 2021 VW Polo.
Help it out. Took the family up to go and see the snow and I got stuck. The service was quick even though it was in a very remote area. Absolutely phenomenal service from Outsurance.
SMS out to 30754 now. That's out to 30754. Outsurance is a licensed insurer and FSP. T's, C's and limits apply. Premiums are risk profile dependent and reviewed annually. Client comments do not constitute financial advice.
Mama Kitty, I heard Rand Water talking on the radio about how dangerous it is for people to encroach on their pipeline servitude.
Yes, those high-pressure Rand Water pipelines are under the ground distributing megalitres of water. When people build on top of the pipeline, Rand Water is unable to conduct maintenance on the pipeline, which has a negative impact on water provision. Pipelines can burst without warning. People could get seriously injured or worse.
Yes, people can die from a bursting pipe. That is why people need to understand that Rand Water servitude is where a Rand Water pipeline is located. If we build our houses or businesses on a Rand Water servitude, then we are encroaching on that servitude. They say if communities want to know whether they have encroached over servitudes, they should look for the Rand Water beacons.
The beacons indicate the presence of Rand Water pipelines under the ground. They're rectangular, made of concrete, are painted either white or blue and have the Rand Water logo on them.
Let's take a walk around our area to see if there are any Rand Water beacons so that we can also tell the neighbors.
Rand Water, celebrating 120 years of existence and still finding new ways to provide clean, portable bulk water.
EFC is live this Thursday. 2 grappling wizards will battle it out for the vacant welterweight title at EFC 113 as Gelson Souza and Zakir Banat fight it out for championship glory. Plus, Faiz Jacobs is out for revenge against the great Sylvester Chifumbu for #1 contendership. EFC 113 live this Thursday. Watch it on SABC Sport Channel on DTT Channel 4 from 7 p.m. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes.
The 600,000 people who were arrested, I mean, what happened to them afterwards? I presume almost all of them would have been released since they were arrested.
Not all have been released. It's quite encouraging that for murder, we still have 4,610 in custody. For attempted murder, we've got 4,217. For rape, we've got 7,052 still in police custody. We've had a number of convictions also during that time. I can confirm to you that for murder, those that got life sentences, we are talking about 161. Rape, we had 417 during that period that got handed down life sentences.
Okay.
20 years and longer, we have a number of suspects as well that have been convicted for various crimes.
Brigadier Linda Matep, thank you very much indeed. National spokesperson for the South African Police Service.
SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes, 6 to 9 a.m.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
You're listening to The Talking Point. It's 10 after 10 o'clock. Coming up in this hour special broadcast, we're looking at climate change and the elections. So much of the conversation will focus on the just transition, the steps that South Africa needs to be able to take in order to reach our target to a zero carbon economy. What is it that the different political parties are offering up in their manifestos? We've got the ANC, the DA and the EFF that will be part of this conversation over the next hour. Before we get to it, your voice notes.
Let's have the conversation. WhatsApp voice notes on 0614 104 107.
Morning, Cathy. Morning. Hey, I don't know why Ramaphosa. Manifesto ANC says they will create 2 million jobs in 5 years. Right? That's their manifesto. He goes to Cape Town. He tells people at Langa that he will create 5 million jobs in 5 years. So, which one is it? Are these guys are they taking us for fools, or is Ramaphosa really serious? Okay. What? Hi, corner. No ways, man. That's why young people don't vote. It's such things.
Morning. What we're hearing about the MK is very disturbing. That we can find leaders who are willingly to be bought just to sell the revolution. The MK is a revolution. It goes deeper into the real politics of this country. That of a land and Africanness. It's very disturbing to see that leaders can just sell the revolution just for the sake of money. And even those ones who buy people, why do you do? Because this is for the betterment of a black child. How can you sell the revolution? Because MK is not talking politics. It talks the real conflicting issue that we have in South Africa. The land question, that the black majority is marginalized in their own country. And some leaders are saying that is wrong, and they are prepared to sacrifice the revolution just for the sake of money.
Hi, I'm Cathy. Hope you are good. This is Grace from Mafikeng. With the whole thing of political parties and everything, wouldn't it be nice if there was probably some sort of a period that a reigning party could rule, and then if maybe they have ruled for a certain number of years, it would be a thing of they would step down and then give another party a chance, even if it's just for one term. And then they must contest, because, yeah. Alrighty.
SAFM values your views. Be an active citizen.
Well, the climate crisis is a global issue and it does pose significant local impacts. It, of course, also affects poor and vulnerable communities in this country. Urgent action undoubtedly is required. And South Africa, of course, will have to transition from what is our coal-heavy economy, but that transition needs a lot of planning, but it also needs a lot of funding. Despite the imminent introduction of the climate change bill, efforts to bolster climate resilience and to shift away from fossil fuels have been largely inconsistent. Climate change is not just an environmental concern, but also a social and an economic one, especially relevant as we approach the upcoming elections on the 29th of May. So this special roundtable, we're looking for insights from political parties on their climate policies, just given the seriousness of this issue. Joining us for this conversation today in studio, Dave Bryant is a member of Parliament representing the Democratic Alliance. Dave, good morning.
Good morning, Cathy. Thank you.
I'm going to ask you just to move slightly closer to your mic, please, Dave. Thank you. On the line, joining us via Zoom, Barbara Creasy, the Minister of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment, representing the ANC. Barbara, good morning.
Good morning to you and good morning to Dave and Nazir.
And Nazir Paulson is a Member of Parliament representing the EFF in this conversation. Nazir, good morning.
Good morning, Cathy. Good morning, Dave. And good morning, Minister Creasy. And good morning to the listeners.
Thank you for that, Nazir. Barbara, I think a good place to begin would be with you because the ANC is the incumbent, and by and large, the ANC has had the opportunity of really leading policy discussions around climate change. I think many people know of your personal commitment, right, to wanting to make an impact and to making sure that South Africa meets the targets that it has committed to in terms of reducing our carbon emissions. However, when we look more broadly at what has been the messaging coming out of government, sometimes it is inconsistent, often it is confusing. Why is that the case, and what is the position?
Good morning once again, Cathy, and of course, good morning to all of your listeners. And I think it's important to start by saying that the African National Congress takes climate change seriously and has done so for the past 30 years. Under our leadership, South African governments have signed the United Nations Convention on Climate Change, the Kyoto Protocol, and more recently, the Paris Agreement. And in 2023, we submitted a revised nationally determined contribution with ambitious targets to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and build a climate resilient and inclusive society and economy. Now, our party aims to balance environmental sustainability with economic development and social equity. And as we reduce greenhouse gas emissions and build resilience and adaptive capacity, we aim to do so in a manner that does not leave vulnerable workers and communities behind and also does not undermine energy security. Under our leadership, government has put in place the architecture to both mitigate greenhouse gas emissions and to adapt to the impacts of climate change on people, infrastructure, food, and water. Now, I think that the proof of the pudding is really in the evidence. And the 9th greenhouse gas inventory, which I published last week, indicates that current country emissions are below the 2-degree average temperature increase, which is included in the Paris Agreement. But more work and a lot more finance will be required to reduce emissions and make a fair share contribution to holding global average temperature increase at the 1.5 degree mark, an increase that science tells us is preferable to the average temperature increase of 2 degrees. As a party, we are committed to mobilizing finances and working for the change both locally and internationally to ensure that we can reach the lower temperature goal and transition our economy in a just and sustainable and, of course, inclusive way.
Would you say that there has been consensus in the ANC and in cabinet around how this transition needs to take place. And I would say this by and large because of how our economy is structured currently, the role of an entity like Eskom, and what seems like this ongoing debate over whether we should be bringing in more renewables and moving away from coal, or whether we need to be sticking with coal.
Cathy, nothing that I have done during the course of this parliamentary term has been done without a cabinet decision. So Cabinet has submitted the revised NDC. Cabinet has approved the National Greenhouse Gas Emissions. Cabinet has approved the JET IP investment plan. So all of the decisions that have been made with cabinet consensus. Obviously, the electricity crisis that we have faced over the last 2 years has meant that there has had to be a hold on the progress on decommissioning coal-fired power plants, because what we clearly understand is that we cannot undermine energy security because of the impact that it has on the economy. However, as I have indicated, we are within the nationally determined contribution of reducing greenhouse gases that we have submitted to the United Nations, and we intend to remain within the 2025 target and in due course within the 2030 target.
All right. Let me come to you, Dave, in studio as a member of Parliament representing the DA. So the DA, of course, is not in government, so a lot less pressure on you from the perspective of necessarily driving policy in the way that the ANC does. But I think across the board, activists within the climate change space are largely critical of all political parties in terms of what they see as a failure to show leadership on climate issues. How would you as the DA respond to that critique? And perhaps tell us, in what ways do you believe you have shown leadership on this issue?
Thanks very much, Cathy. And I think just, before we get into that, you spoke about this perceived confusion or lack of clear direction when it comes to climate change issues emanating from the ANC cabinet. And then that perception does exist, unfortunately. But imagine how far worse it would be with a coalition between the ANC, the EFF, and potentially the MK party. I think we'd be seeing a lot more disagreements. So I think we need to do everything we can to ensure that doesn't happen.
Dave, are you going to start us off there? Really, Dave?
But just getting back onto the DA's offering that we have. The DA is in government, unfortunately not at national level at the moment, but we are in government in the city of Cape Town, and we have been in government there since 2006, and we've been in government in the Western Cape since 2009. And in both the province and the city of Cape Town, as well as in some of the other municipalities in the Western Cape where we are in government, we've taken significant strides towards developing climate change legislation first and foremost. The climate change strategy, which was developed by the city of Cape Town back in 2017 already, and also the updated climate strategy by the Western Cape provincial government, which was recently updated, I think, in 2022. And we have very sophisticated frameworks that we've put together, including resilience strategies to deal with upcoming shocks and stresses, not only from climate change but from other associated issues. So we are making significant strides in terms of the legislative side of things, but we're also doing some other things. For instance, in the city of Cape Town, we have plans to create what we call prosumers, and these are individuals who have existing renewable energy capacity within their homes and businesses, i.e. solar panels in most instances, and making sure that we cut the red tape and develop legislation so that they are able to feed that energy back into the grid, therefore reducing electricity and energy demand, but also at the same time simultaneously ensuring that we cut our carbon emissions. And we have many other similar plans and strategies that are in place in the city of Cape Town and in the Western Cape.
So Dave, part of even just this idea of a just transition really is to try and cushion the impact, right, of what the steps that need to be taken in order for us to get to zero emissions, to protect workers, to protect communities. You talk about the city of Cape Town in particular, and it's an interesting case study, right, because the city of Cape Town a few years ago was faced with the prospect of day zero. And the questions that then a party like the DA would have to answer in this context is, what were the plans that were put in place to cushion and shield the poor and shield the vulnerable and middle class in middle class households from the cost of day zero? Retrospectively, we have the opportunity of looking at that retrospectively. So what do you think you did in that moment that showed that this is a conversation that or this is an issue that you're actually on top of?
So I was lucky enough to be at the City of Cape Town during the water crisis period. It was a very difficult time. I served on the Water Resilience Advisory Committee, which was a group put together by the City of Cape Town under the DA administration, not only of political representatives, but a wide range of academics, representatives from NGOs, local civic associations, etc. And we helped to put together a comprehensive plan, which I think a lot of people forget, enabled us to avoid day zero. We are seeing many cities, unfortunately, and towns across the country that are currently experiencing water shedding. Gauteng as a province in particular, we are seeing water shedding taking place. And we didn't experience that in Cape Town because of very, very sophisticated plans that were put in place, and that was water demand management. I think one of the things at the time that people maybe didn't pick up on is that the majority of water demand was actually coming from middle class and more affluent homes, people who were using water on a regular basis for recreational purposes and for watering lawns and that kind of thing. And we were particularly hard when it came to clamping down on wastage and water overuse in those areas. And the poor were actually very largely protected during that time. We had a disaster risk management plan in place, which included the provision of water tankers and additional water facilities if need be, which would have catered for the poor if we reached that stage. Luckily, we didn't, and subsequently we've actually been lauded internationally by a number of organizations for our response during that time, and it's helped us to become a more resilient city.
Nazir, let me bring you in here and perhaps give you the opportunity to tell us how it is you believe that the EFF is showing leadership on the issue of climate change.
Thank you very much, Cathy. Cathy, I want to start off with the premise that Africa as a whole is responsible for less than 4% of greenhouse gas emissions. And yet we as a country here in Africa, South Africa, have to pay the highest price for climate change. So, and where that is affects us most is when it comes to energy supply. So they want us to move over to renewables. But that is not going to provide us with the stable energy supply in order to reindustrialize our economy, in order to create jobs for our people. And since Dave has used his imagination to attack an incoming EFF government, I want to bring Dave back to the realities of the Cape Town and the Western Cape where he lives, and I live, and where Parliament is situated. Every year, the same informal settlements, and you know about this, Cathy, you spoke about it once on the show. Every year, the same informal settlements burn down. And every year, the DA led City of Cape Town's response to those fires. It's very reactive rather than being proactive. They provide the victims of these fires with materials to rebuild the shacks every year. So Dave speaks about how proactive they were in addressing the day zero possibility. They were proactive, but they are proactive because a day zero would not just affect the poor, it would affect the rich. But when it comes to how the poor are affected, instead of building houses that would cushion the poor against catastrophes like floods and wildfires, the DA-led Western Cape government has a backlog of 600,000 houses. So 600,000 families are without dignified shelter when it comes to any climate catastrophe. And I think we should focus on that as well. And I think this is where the EFF government is going to be proactive. The DA-led government here in the Western Cape can only provide between 5,000 and 20,000 houses per year. So a worst case scenario, if the DA could only deliver 5,000, it will take us 120 years just to work through the backlog. So the DA is not a DA government is not an option for the Western Cape any longer. We need a government that's going to address the serious issue of housing, to shelter the poor from climate change. And also climate sensitive housing construction. So our response would be a state construction company that will be responsible not just for delivering on the 600,000 housing backlog, but would be responsible for delivering more schools where it's needed, more clinics and hospitals where it's needed, also the construction of roads run by the state. So that would be our response into making sure that the poor is cushioned against the impending effect of climate change.
All right, Nazir, we're going to have to pause it there. It's time for the latest news headlines. We'll continue our conversation among the three political parties, looking at their commitments when it comes to matters of climate change in their political party manifestos. I'm back with your headlines and, of course, the market update. I'll also be taking your calls and contributions to this conversation in a moment.
Thanks, Cathy. A very good morning. With the news headlines, Mudupi Makhalemele. ANC MP Boy Mamabolo says he's launching a new bid in the High Court in Joburg to set aside the Limpopo ANC's national candidate list. President Cyril Ramaphosa has sent his condolences to the relatives and friends of 5 people killed in an incident in which a building collapsed in George in the Western Cape. And police have gunned down a wanted illegal mining kingpin linked to 29 murders, including a mass shooting at a tavern in Nomzamo Park, Soweto. I'll be back with a full news update at 11.
Taking a look at your markets this morning, the rand is currently trading at 18 rand 46 to the dollar, 23 rand 14 to the pound, and 19 rand 88 to the euro. Markets in Asia ended mixed. The JSE has extended gains in mid-morning trade. Markets in Europe slightly higher this hour. Gold is trading at $2,319, platinum $955 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $82.81 a barrel.
Any person aggrieved by any political advertisement or political election broadcast that is broadcast by SAFM may lodge a complaint within 5 days from broadcast with the Independent Communications Authority of South Africa, ICASA. To lodge your complaint, please contact ICASA's Compliance Department via telephone number on 012-568-3233. That's 012-568-3233. Or email broadcastingcompliance@icasa.org.za. That's broadcastingcompliance@icasa.org.za. Alternatively, complaints ccc@icasa.org.za. That's complaintsccc@icasa.org.za.
Greenpeace is on a mission for a greener world. We're all about making the switch from fossil fuels to renewable energy because it's just common sense, right? Don't buy into the hype about oil and gas. They'll only make our climate crisis and extreme weather worse. We're pushing for real change, like in Mpumalanga, where we teamed up with MS Environmental Projects, who just won in court against the municipality for pollution. So when it's time to vote, remember to say yes to renewable energy. Swing by greenpeace.org/Africa to join the movement.
Catch the Tastemaster essay this Tuesday at 7 on SABC2. It's Elimination Week, and contestants must make big things happen as they fight to stay in the competition. Their task? To create an impressive tower of baked items in a test of skill and creativity. Who will survive to bake another day? Find out on the Tastemaster essay. Tuesdays at 7, repeat Wednesdays at 1, and Sundays at 4 p.m. on SABC2.
The Saturday Play. Who the hell does he think he is? Just because he's a teacher and he drives a car, he thinks he can take my girlfriend? Catch me, Tebogo Sefako Matenji, on the Saturday Play. Okay, Mike Mulitsane. I know you have been sleeping with schoolgirls, but this time you have taken it too far.
Catch the Saturday Play between 9 and 10 p.m. Only on SAFM.
Bridget Masinga on SAFM.
Can we avoid this being a race thing? When we're talking diversity and inclusion and equity, surely we should also be very deliberate about the penetration of particularly black women in these spaces.
We have, if you see in that article, 42% of children live in female-headed households. So women in South Africa play a massive role in looking after children and communities. And of course, then that means that they need the resources to be able to do that. There's a ripple effect in terms of the challenges we are seeing about women's economic advancement and women's advancement in the workplace, and how that affects the development and progress of families and children and so on. So I don't think we need to see it. It's not a race issue. It's actually an issue of this country.
Shireen Mutara, the founding CEO.
You are listening to The Full Circle.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
We continue the conversation on The Talking Point, a special broadcast, a debate on climate change and what it is that political parties are saying about the issue in their manifestos. We're joined by the ANC's Barbara Creasy, the DA's Dave Bryant, and the EFF's Nazir Paulson. So, Barbara, I'm going to come back to you. Again, there will be a lot of things that the ANC, of course, can answer on the matter of climate change because you are the party in government. So 2 things that I want to speak about. Part of the successes that often are pointed to when it comes to how to manage transitions is the need for consultations to take place with communities, that people and the broad stakeholders are engaged, whether it is companies, whether it is workers and surrounding communities around the impact of what the changes that are coming might be. Let's take a look at Komati and what has happened in that area since the closure of the Komati power station. Do you think that that has been the best possible outcome for the people of Komati? Should it have been handled differently?
Cathy, thanks very much for that question, and I will come to it in a minute. But in order to frame the answer, I think that it's important to make the point that while we are worried about the impacts of climate change on poor and vulnerable communities, and we are also concerned, as you point out in your question, on the question of climate justice and whether poor and vulnerable communities are being adequately involved in the transition. one needs to start by pointing out that the climate transition is also an important economic opportunity for our country. And our election manifesto very clearly prioritizes the development of green technology in areas such as energy efficiency, waste management, climate smart agriculture, infrastructure, green hydrogen, battery storage, and electric vehicles. And I'm mentioning all of this because I think we understand that one of the biggest issues in this election is the state of our economy and the question of whether or not we will be able to create jobs, not just for those who are involved in the climate transition, but for the many millions of young South Africans who have left school and who currently are not able to find employment. The ANC's manifesto commits the country to an industrialization path and the growth of new manufacturing sectors. And the sectors I've mentioned, such as green hydrogen, battery storage, and electric vehicles, are across the globe, the growth areas and the job creation areas. And we, in our manifesto, are committing ourselves to making South Africa a key opportunity for these types of manufacturing and industrialized industries. And this is obviously very important because as we move away from coal generation and from coal mining over the next 30 years towards our mid-century net zero commitment, it's very important that we're not just creating service level jobs or extended public works type of jobs, but we're actually creating the same kind of quality jobs that exist in the coal value chain at present. And in our manifesto, we commit ourselves to mobilizing the investment for this transition. We commit ourselves to supporting innovation and research and development in green technologies. And we also commit ourselves to a major skills development exercise so that we are able to transition workers in the coal value chain, but also, more importantly, unemployed young people into these new opportunities in the economy. And we've already introduced tax incentives for the production of electric vehicles. We've raised capital through the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan. And there are already programs related to this that will develop the necessary skills. In my view, Komati, which was supposed to be, in a sense, the Eskom's test case, is not a good test case. And what we found in the Komati situation was that although workers directly employed in that coal-fired power station were shifted to other stations, and so they did not lose their jobs, what was not taken into account in that transition was the broader ecosystem that was dependent on that power station. And so one found that those people who were supplying meals, for example, those who were service providers to Komati, those are the enterprises and the individuals that have suffered through the closure of that power station. What we've learned from that example is that long before you start talking about decommissioning, you have to talk about front-loading alternative industries, alternative training and retraining, and also proper involvement, not just of labor unions, but of community organizations, so that communities are able to identify new economic opportunities, they're able to mobilize the finances for this, and they are able to not just be workers in those industries, but actually become owners of new forms of industry and technology.
All right.
So I think the whole way we are approaching the transition through the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan is now about saying, let's do the research on finding the alternative industries. Let's set them up. Let's front load the social relief and the skills training way ahead of the decommissioning process.
All right. Dave, let me come to you. Again, when we talk about these industries, it's really about, powering up our economy, right, and different ways in which that can happen. The DA talks a lot about the involvement of the private sector, especially when it comes to just energy transition. We can stick with Eskom as an example, where, of course, there's a big push for renewable energy. Often these renewable energies are held by private companies, and it's a private industry-led initiative. But what we know about private companies is that often they're not the best distributors of equality. And in fact, there is, if we look at part of the inequalities that exist, much of that is laid at the door of the economy, its structure, and how different industries have been industrialized over the years.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, we definitely would like to see far more involvement from the private sector. I mean, we believe that Eskom should be unbundled, and we've been saying that for a very long time. And to create space for more role players from the private sector to enter in. One of the things that we're going to commit to as the DA, if we are able to form the centre of a new national government, is to review and to streamline the restrictive regulations that are currently inhibiting both the public and the private sector in terms of more rapid procurement of new renewable energy generation capacity. And we're going to do this by creating frameworks for residential small-scale embedded generation, which we're already carrying out in the city of Cape Town, and also prioritising the streamlining of the independent power producer licensing and all of the other registration processes where we see these bottlenecks at Eskom hampering the progress of getting new renewable infrastructure in place. I think it's one of the things that's been holding South Africa back for many years is the apprehension from government and the ANC in particular towards the private sector, and seeing the private sector as this sort of intimidating, scary beast, instead of really embracing all of the positive impacts that the private sector could bring, including increased competition. And what increased competition does is it drives down prices. If we have to say, for instance, the private sector has the potential to do some damage in certain instances, perhaps that's true. But let's look at what the current alternative is and what's been rolled out in the rest of the country by the ANC. It's certainly not something that
Dave,
many people would prefer.
I want to, for the purpose of this question, I want to stick with Komati as an example. So if you take a look at what Komati has become, and it's devastating for the community there, what would you, as the DA, have done differently in Komati, which aligns with your policies, which you believe would have had a different outcome?
Well, I think the most important thing to remember about this just transition discussion is that, as you correctly mentioned, and the ministers also mentioned this, it all centres around the economy and jobs. And one of the things that we do know about DA governments, in particular the DA government of the Western Cape, is that where the DA is in government, there are more jobs. There is a statistic that many people find hard to believe, that in the past 5 years, almost 79% of all net jobs in the country were created in the Western Cape. That's 4/5 of all the jobs in the country over the past 5 years were created in the Western Cape. It's a staggering stat. And one of the reasons why that's taking place is because we are encouraging private sector investment. People feel confident that there's a government that is providing them with quality service delivery. And if we were in government in an area like Komati, for instance, a DA government would have ensured that we put steps in place to ensure that there was an adequate transition.
But how? So to speak to me practically, because we have a case study of what has happened. But what would you have done differently?
Well, I think one of the misconceptions about moving away from coal jobs towards other jobs is that there have to be jobs specifically within that particular sector. And one of the things that we're finding in international best practice when it comes to this just transition. And it's not just us. There's many countries who are going through this. There are other potential job opportunities that are available for people within the industry. If we look at the coal industry, they currently employ around about 100,000 people. Okay, direct workers, around about 100,000 people in the country. So that's about 0.5% of the total employment in South Africa. So if you think about the jobs that the DA has created over the past 5 years, we've created a few 100,000 jobs. The next 5 years, we're going to create about 800,000. So if you're able to invest specifically in that, we have the lowest unemployment rate, 20.2% in the country. But this is a very important point.
But you're not answering my question.
A country like South Africa, unfortunately, has a very high unemployment rate. In the Western Cape, we have a 20.2% unemployment rate.
Dave, I hear all of that.
It's 35.5%.
I was looking for a very specific answer, and I think my question was direct and simple.
Yes.
It was about what would have been the interventions you had put in place. Because Komati is really, I think, a case study that all political parties who are dealing with matters of climate change need to be looking at realistically to say, this is what this is the experience we have as a country. Okay, I'm going to give Nazir an opportunity. Yeah, I'm going to give Nazir an opportunity. I've given you a lot of time, Dave. Nazir, let me give you a chance to come in here and perhaps again from the perspective of the EFF. You look at case like what has happened in Komati, a pilot community for a transition in this country. Under the EFF government, what would you have done in that community that aligns with your policies?
Thank you very much, Cathy. And I think what would have been ideal for Komati is to actually for us to venture into experimenting with clean coal. Now, what clean coal is there's no such thing as clean coal, but what we do is to capture the carbon emissions and reduce emissions into the atmosphere, making the environment a lot more palatable than what it was at the time. So we could have in that way have kept Komati running. It was running efficiently, producing the necessary energy we needed and creating jobs for people. To go for the ANC to have just gone to shut down is actually responding to demands from foreign governments for us to switch over from coal to renewables. And it was at COP26 where Joe Biden announced that South Africa will be switching off its coal power stations and moving to renewables. So
Nazir,
we should have looked at other options of dealing with Komati, like, for example, clean coal, so that we continued to pursue the ideal of mixed energy sources, including clean coal, gas, nuclear energy as a base load, and renewables. But over and above that, the EFF will not allow the privatization of Eskom. In fact, we will consolidate energy generation, transmission, and distribution as one company under Eskom, and also pursue renewable energy under Eskom, which is what the ANC should have done. In that way, we'll also make use of the existing. I think it was premature to shut down Komati. We should look at repurposing or retraining existing skills to pursue other forms of energy.
So,
generation.
Nazir, when you talk about clean coal, what do you mean by that? What is clean coal?
Clean coal is where you reduce the emissions from coal, reduce the emissions into the atmosphere, and rather capture those emissions and reduce the effect it has on the environment. It is an option, and in fact, a lot of European countries are restarting their coal power stations, importing truckloads or shiploads of coal from South Africa. You can just go to Richards Bay right now and you'll see over 100 trucks transporting coal to the harbour to be exported to Europe, that has now fired up the coal power stations, because clean coal is an option when it comes to coal-powered power stations.
Okay. So of course, there's also the issue of the technologies and how we would make these technologies available in the country, and also just how slow the process of this carbon capture that you're talking about is. But by and large, the move even for a just energy transition is to really break away from what are the so-called fossil fuels, right? And you talk about gas. Gas is also considered to be a fossil fuel. So yes, effectively, so as the EFF, you don't believe that we should be cutting out fossil fuels?
Cathy, we are cutting out fossil fuels because we are being dictated to by foreign governments to reduce our reliance on coal as a baseload, simply because those governments would rather import our coal and use their technologies.
And what about the impact that would have on the economy? So in the long run, Nazir, what we know now is that industries are going to be taxed heavily if they're not complying with the set international regulations. Countries are also going to be taxed heavily for that. So that means that whatever we produce is going to become largely uncompetitive in an international market.
Cathy, the minister also mentions industries, new industries that will require specialized skills that we don't have at the moment. So we are saying we can address unemployment by building industries that will absorb those unemployed, unutilized skills, and to come up with new industries that will require skills that still need to be developed is going to be disastrous for the economy of this country. Okay. So we have to weigh up, do we stick with industries that we have the skills for, or do we build industries that we don't have skills for, and even further increase the levels of unemployment?
All right, Nazir.
I just want to address Dave's comment about the Western Cape having the lowest unemployment rate.
Very quickly, please.
In the Western Cape, African and coloured people are job seekers rather than job providers. We would like to change that dynamic and make sure that we allow new entrants into the economy to create jobs for our people.
Thanks for that, Nazir. So here's what we're going to do. We've got quite a number of listeners that want to ask questions of our panelists. So we're going to extend this conversation until about, I think, 20 past 11, just to give everybody the opportunity then to engage. I'm going to kick it off with Richard in Cape Town. Richard, if there is a particular party that you are directing your question to, please say so. But otherwise, then I'll give them all an opportunity to respond. Good morning, Richard. You're calling us from Cape Town.
Morning, Cathy. How are you?
Well, thank you, Richard. Go for it.
I like your show. I'm not going to ask straight to the party. What I'm asking, we South Africa, we like to copy too much, but we're not like other countries like overseas where they are rich, they've got money. Now they're talking about climate change. The climate change, this petrol has been changed to the unleaded some few years ago. Now they're talking about they want to copy for electrician car to bring it here. There's a lot of people who work in the petrol station. What about those people? It's going to lose their job. Now you fix other place, you mess up the other side. So like now there's a technology come here. People are losing jobs in the post office. People keep on losing the job, but you want to fix this, but you're damaging the country.
Okay, Richard, thanks for that question. And it's a question to all the political parties. I'll give them an opportunity to respond after the news. MTKZ, you're out in Ladysmith. Good morning.
Morning, Cathy. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Go for it.
Okay, Cathy, on the issue of what are we talking about? We're talking about climate change, right? But
MTKZ, yes.
Yes, the biggest issue in the country is unemployment. That is the biggest issue that we should be focusing on in this country right now. And I don't believe the DA are the best people to bring the solution to this country, because it's because of the DA that we have a lot of foreign people taking up jobs in South Africa. Because where the DA governs, capitalism rules, right? And we can't go on pushing capitalism in South Africa. We need a communist system to run the show in South Africa right now.
All right, MTKZ, thank you for that question. He is out in Ladysmith. I'll be taking more of your calls on 086 000 2032 on the WhatsApp voice note line 0614 104107. I'm going to just put one more question to our panelists before we take you to news. This is coming through from the WhatsApp line.
Hi, Cathy. I'd like to comment on the comments from the person from the DA regarding water shortage and day zero in Cape Town. I would like to comment that our dams were upgraded. We also now have hydroelectricity. And there are many of us that are still going to Newland Springs to collect water because of the water restrictions and the high cost for the usage of water in your lower income households. So it's not because of the DA's measures that we are surviving as the underprivileged. It's because we have to find our own ways and means to recycle water and get water. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for that perspective. So we're going to take the latest 11 o'clock news. When we continue, I'm back with Barbara Creasy, Nazir Paulson and Dave Bryant. Do stay with us. It's time for your latest news update.
Very much, Cathy. And the top stories this hour: a new court bid against the Limpopo ANC's candidate list, and an illegal mining kingpin gunned down in Soweto. A very good morning to you. Starting with election news, ANC MP Boy Mamabolo says he's launching a new bid in the High Court in Joburg to set aside the Limpopo ANC national candidates list. He says the new application comes after the party's SG Fikile Mbalula acknowledged that the provincial ANC list had serious challenges related to manipulation. Last month, the court struck Mamabolo's application off the roll, saying it was not urgent. Another ANC MP, Ponani Makubele, has written to the party to complain about a similar problem. Batseba Maboa reports.
Mamabolo says his new fresh court application is brought after recent comments by the party Secretary General Fikile Mbalula.
Where there was a bigger challenge was Limpopo, but equally that one we are attending to it.
Mamabolo remains adamant that the list should be declared null and void. Meanwhile, another ANC MP, Ponani Makubele, has written to the party to complain about the removal of her name from top 100 to 124 on the list. Batseba Mabua, SABC News in Polokwane.
A small group of MK members has arrived at the ANC headquarters in Joburg. The group is singing struggle songs outside Luthuli House. Party members planned to gather there after the ANC announced that its former president and current MK party leader Jacob Zuma would appear before the governing party's disciplinary committee. Zuma is accused of violating the ANC's constitution. The ANC has postponed the hearing to a date yet to be announced, citing security reasons. In other news, President Cyril Ramaphosa has sent his condolences to the relatives and friends of 5 people killed in an incident in which a building collapsed in George in the Western Cape. 25 people have been removed from the rubble, but 49 others are still unaccounted for. About 75 workers were on site when the building collapsed yesterday afternoon. Presidential spokesperson Vincent Magwenya.
The President's thoughts are with the families who have lost loved ones, as well as the families of close to 50 people who are trapped in the rubble. President Ramaphosa wishes rescue teams the best as they go about their operations and says investigations into the cause of the incident must aim to bring closure to the community and prevent a repeat of this disaster.
Police have gunned down a wanted illegal mining kingpin linked to 29 murders, including a mass shooting at a tavern in Nomzamo Park in Soweto. A gunman opened fire on the patrons in July 2022. Police say the deceased Lesotho national was traced to Jabulani in Soweto at the weekend. He resisted arrest and allegedly pointed a firearm at the police, who fatally shot him. National Police spokesperson Atlinda Mate says this police initiative is part of Operation Vala Umgodi.
Just last week, the team also registered notable successes in Limpopo, where 62 illegal miners were arrested. 9 others were arrested in the Northern Cape. In the previous week, they seized 1 million in cash from Carltonville, as well as illicit mining equipment, such as your explosive devices and digging equipment. Since its inception in December 2023, 7,130 uncut diamonds worth 32 million rand has also been seized.
And Vladimir Putin will be sworn in as the president of Russia for a 5th term later today. His electoral victory in March took place just weeks after his most prominent opponent, Alexei Navalny, died in jail. Western governments condemned the vote as unfair and undemocratic. The BBC's Steve Rosenberg has more.
Mr. Putin has been in power in Russia as president or head of the government for nearly a quarter of a century. In that time, Britain has had 7 prime ministers. His decision 2 years ago to launch a full-scale invasion of Ukraine and Russia's war there are likely to define Vladimir Putin's time in office. As he embarks on his 5th term in the Kremlin, tension between Russia and the West remains high, while at home the crackdown on dissent appears to be intensifying.
The top story at 11, ANC MP Boy Mamabolo says he's launching a new bid in the High Court in Joburg to set aside the Limpopo ANC's national candidates lists. For SAFM News, Mudupi Makhalemeli.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide.
Hear that? That's the sound of deliciousness in your kitchen after watching Ready Steady Cook. You don't season the same no more. The way you chop, slay. You do it with so much flair, because you've channeled your Salt Bay. Uyashisa. Turn up the heat. Off the bone with the meat. You're in your kitchen prime. Always dishing on time. Need I serve more? Catch Ready Steady Cook weekdays at 7 p.m. on S3 and channel your inner 5-star chef. Channel a better you with S3.
Welcome to the game of life. At kickoff, it's 0-0. What you do next decides the result. Make a good decision, you're ahead. Make a mistake, you're chasing. You need a good plan and a great team behind you. Find that team at lifeofconfidence.co.za. Sanlam. Live with confidence. Sanlam Life is a licensed life insurer, financial services and registered credit provider.
For the first time in 30 years, the ANC is set to lose its majority. Opposition parties have united as the multi-party charter for South Africa.
A strong democratic alliance with a proven track record
can anchor a new government that serves the people.
But a new government that works is only possible if you vote for it. Let's unite and rescue South Africa. Vote DA.
This political party advertisement was paid for by the political party concerned.
The views expressed in this advertisement are those of the political party and not those of the SABC.
I want to talk to this girl, but I'm shy, bro. Come on, go talk to her, bro. It's a masquerade party. Plus, you know the ladies love a man with a bit of mystery. Don't worry, we got you. Hey, girl.
I just want to know who's behind that mess. From the moment I saw you, you stole my heart. Can I please get your number, babe? And I'll take your word. I promise to love you forever, and this I vow. Ooh, ooh, ooh.
I'll show you my face if you show me yours.
Let's face it, when you channel your inner superstar, every moment turns into a musical. Catch The Masked Singer SA, Saturdays at 6:30 p.m. and see who's hiding behind the mask. Channel A Better You with S3. S3, open up.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
It's 11:09. Welcome to the third hour of the show. Coming up in this hour, later on, of course, we'll be talking to the unions to find out what role they believe they can play in saving jobs in the country. Before we get to that, however, we're going to round up our conversation with political parties, particularly on issues of climate change. So just before we went to news, we gave the opportunity to our listeners to ask the first round of questions. Of course, the question that was addressed to everyone was around how to save jobs in the context of a transition. I'm going to ask our panelists to please keep your answers as short as possible for me. Barbara, I'm going to kick it off with you. Of course, Barbara Creasy is the Minister of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment, and she's representing the ANC in this conversation. Nazir Paulson is a Member of Parliament representing the EFF, and in studio, Dave Bryant is a Member of Parliament representing the Democratic Alliance. So there were two questions directed at the DA, so I'll give them an opportunity to go last in this round. Barbara, over to you.
Thanks very much, Cathy. And I think that the important issue which listeners are raising is the question of climate justice. And how do we ensure that those who are least responsible for climate change are not the victims, not only of climate change itself, but also of the transition process. During the previous term of government, I initiated the establishment of the Climate Commission. And the Climate Commission produced a climate justice framework, which a just transition framework, which was adopted by Cabinet, and which guides the way in which we proceed with the transition. So while I think we are all agreed that except for Honourable Paulson, I think we're all agreed that the transition offers important opportunities for the creation of new jobs and new forms of ownership. We have to make sure that the way in which we implement that transition involves vulnerable workers and communities in deciding what kinds of alternatives they would want to establish, but also ensures that those vulnerable workers and communities don't just face the risk of the climate change, but also benefit from the opportunities that are being created. Let me take the important question that was raised about what about workers who are working in petrol stations. Now, obviously, if we are going to be running electric vehicles, we're going to need a national network of charging stations, because an electric vehicle at the moment can run about 200 kilometers before it needs charging. So one of the questions that we would have to consider in this transition is how do we work together with workers and owners of petrol stations so that we gradually start to introduce charging capacity for electric vehicles in these stations.
All right.
So this is what we mean by making sure that we transition at a pace that our country can afford, at a speed that is realistic, And that while we are doing that, we are mobilizing the finances and doing the research into alternatives that will ensure that both workers and communities benefit.
Nazir?
Thank you very much, Cathy. Minister, there's no way where I said that we shouldn't be switching to or embark on a just energy transition. I just said the pace and timing is important of it. So the EFF's approach, and I want to address Richard's question. He also spoke about electrical cars, pump attendants losing their jobs. Now, Shell has moved out of South Africa simply because Shell's business model is transitioning from petrol to electrical charging stations. Now, this is where South Africa is once again caught napping. Had we embarked on developing our own electrical vehicles, we could have had Shell here also with the power stations, but this creates an opportunity for others because it's something we're going to have to do. What is illogical is to have an electrical power station or electrical vehicle that is recharged by electricity that is generated from coal only. So we need to transition South Africa from a wholly coal-based energy source to a fair mix of energy sources comprising fossil, nuclear, and renewable energy. But over and above that, I think the important issue is also raised by MTKZ, where he says that when it comes to unemployment, the DA are not the best. We need to create opportunities for others to enter the economy and not just those who have been privileged all this time. So Africans and coloreds shouldn't just be seen as job seekers, but people who would create jobs for others. And I think the EFF's process of industrialization or wanting to re-industrialize South Africa. For example, I live in the Western Cape. Saldanha Bay Harbour is the size of Richards Bay, Gqeberha, and Cape Town Harbour put together. And it's this big because every month this harbour is where we export 5 million tons of iron ore. Now, it's not just 5 million tons of iron ore. It's jobs that could have been that we are exporting.
Okay.
And opportunities that could have been created locally for our people. So this year's our slogan for this election is our land and jobs now, stop load shedding.
Okay. Nazir, we'll have to leave it there. Let's leave it there. Dave?
Thanks very much, Cathy. I mean, just quickly to respond to Nazir first. I mean, the stats don't lie. 4 out of 5 jobs in the country over the past 5 years being created in the Western Cape is not a stat that we made up. It's a Stats SA stat, and one can go look that up for yourselves. And a lot of the jobs that have been created aren't jobs for wealthy people. They are jobs in many various sectors, and one of them being the business process outsourcing sector, where Cape Town really is leading the way, and the Western Cape as well. So we are also doing a lot of work to create new entrepreneurs within particularly underprivileged parts of Cape Town and the Western Cape. So that certainly is already taking place under the DA, and will continue to do that. Just to come to the other 2 points, I mean, the first one around electric vehicles from Richard, I understand his concern. I think what we have to bear in mind, though, is that there are only about, of the entire makeup of electric of vehicles in South Africa, only 1.5% of those are currently private electric vehicles. So it's currently a very small number, and one of the reasons for that is it's prohibitively expensive to import these vehicles. They are classed as luxury vehicles. And one of the things that we would do as the DA is to incentivize the use of battery-powered vehicles, and doing that through the development of more effective and reliable charging infrastructure along our key transportation routes. And then, very importantly, the removal of those import tariff barriers on those vehicles, and a zero rating for the electric vehicles to make them more price accessible. And then we can start to also develop our own manufacturing capacity within South Africa for electric vehicles, not only private ones, but also potentially battery-powered passenger trains and freight rail transportation as well. And then just lastly, to Cathy, so look, the City of Cape Town does provide free water for those people who are classed as indigent. We offer a free basic allocation within the DA-led City of Cape Town. Sometimes that process is automatically done, but sometimes you have to apply for that as well. And your first 6,000 litres of water and your first 4,200 litres of sewage are free of charge. And then after that, you get charged on the tariff system. One of the things is for a very long time in Cape Town and in South Africa, water has been incredibly cheap, notwithstanding the free allocations. And one of the things that the water crisis taught us is that making water completely free and cheap for everybody can sometimes lead to more water wastage. So it's not prohibitively expensive, but it is great to see that Cathy is making use of that Newland Spring. I myself used it during the water crisis as well. I drive past it every day, and it's great to see the number of people who are making use of that natural water as well. Thanks.
All right. I think that's where we're going to leave it in this conversation. A big thank you to all of our guests for making time for us, and also agreeing to extend the conversation a little bit longer to accommodate the questions and the contributions that we had from our guests. We still have quite a lot that we aren't able to take because we are completely out of time. So Dave, thank you so much. Nazir, thank you. Barbara, thank you to you too. And of course, the biggest thank you goes to the Worldwide Fund for Nature South Africa. They're the ones that have made this debate possible. That's where we'll leave it for this conversation. We're back in a moment, and we're asking the unions what they would do to save jobs.
TV licenses have developed a new GIS-linked national address database to ensure that we can communicate with all our valued license holders. We now have a visual of all licensed and unlicensed households nationwide in order to effectively communicate with you. We remind you to take note of our payment reminders and avoid paying penalties due to non-compliance or choosing to ignore your legal obligation to pay your license fees. We can communicate with all our license holders through cost-effective electronic methods, enabling us to collect license fees and continue to support the national broadcaster, the SABC, in accordance with Section 27 of the Broadcasting Act No. 4 of 1999 as amended. TV licenses. Pay yours. Make a difference.
Greenpeace is on a mission for a greener world. We're all about making the switch from fossil fuels to renewable energy because it's just common sense, right? Don't buy into the hype about oil and gas. They'll only make our climate crisis and extreme weather worse. We're pushing for real change, like in Mpumalanga, where we teamed up with MS Environmental Projects, who just won in court against the municipality for pollution. So when it's time to vote, remember to say yes to renewable energy. Swing by greenpeace.org/Africa to join the movement.
The final stretch comes with high emotions and pressure keeps mounting. RB Leipzig are gunning for maximum points on home soil, but their visitors from Bremen believe in the power of 3 points. They want victory for themselves. This is the Bundesliga. Football as it's meant to be. Catch RB Leipzig versus Werder Bremen on Saturday 11 May at 3 p.m. live on SABC3. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. #We love it here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
Well, as we mark Workers' Month, it's celebrated mostly under the month of May. We are looking at the role that unions play within the work environment now. And I think when we started off the conversation on Workers' Day and really taking a look at what unions were doing on Workers' Day, there were quite a number of listeners that expressed a sentiment that they feel that unions do not represent them and that the unions do not actually represent the voices of the people. So today we're asking what role unions can play in saving jobs in this country, because, of course, unemployment is one of the biggest challenges that we face as a society. I'm joined on the line by Ibrahim Harvey. He's a former COSATU unionist, political writer and author. Ibrahim, good morning.
Good morning to you, Cathy. Good morning. Good to be with you.
Rifda Ajam is General Secretary at FEDUSA. Rifda, good morning.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity, Cathy, and good morning to the fellow guests.
And Joseph Matunjwa is the AMCU president. Joseph, good morning.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you to your listeners, to the panel. Good morning.
So, Ibrahim, I want to kick it off with you. I think it was a few weeks back that I read an article you had penned, and it was about the missing social voice in our society. And I just wanted to ask you, what is this missing social voice, and what is the cost of not having that voice, particularly where you have an environment where so many South Africans feel they don't see unions rising up to the occasion and really living up to expectation?
Cathy, no, it's not social voice. It's a News 24 columnist. The socialist voice that was missing.
Yes.
And I drew attention to the fact that, the largely NUMSA-based Socialist Workers' Revolutionary Party that participated in the 2019 elections but got less than 1%, And I said, instead of growing the lessons and then, preparing now for the 2024, it never even registered, And because of the nature of the crisis, you can't just talk of race and color and all. Fundamentally, let me tell you, at the bottom of everything in this country is we have a deep and growing capitalist crisis, which is part of the global capitalist crisis for the past decade. It's never been so bad around the world and in this country. So it's in that context that you needed, urgently a socialist voice in the elections. And then, I was happy when, but rather belatedly, AMCU, Matunjwa and them started this Labour Party, And then so many fights and stuff, and I think they went to the Constitutional Court. I don't think I might have been around that the Constitutional Court resolved that issue, with them. So I don't know where that stands. But rather late in the day, because the reason why NUMSA, SWRP failed in 2019 was they also at the very last minute it was formed, and it contributed, I think, to the fact that they never had enough time, resources, and to campaign and so on. So it's in the light of that, and the failure of theirs, a very deep disappointment to not have participated in this election that I penned that column, in the first place. But our media doesn't pay enough attention to it, partly because of their interest, It's a really deeply systemic capitalist crisis we're facing with. We don't talk enough about it in this country, Cathy. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Ibrahim. Rifda, this is something that a lot of unions will say quite often. Go to any protest and somewhere in it will be something about how the capitalist system is extracting from workers and really leaving them with the bare minimum at the end of the day. How do you think that unions should be going about solidifying their voices and particularly representing the interests of workers?
Cathy, it's a very important conversation that we are having here. And Ibrahim hits the hammer on the head. It is about time, it is about resources, but more especially so, it is about trust. We cannot just be taken for a ride again and again and again. And, you know, during this Workers' Month celebrations, it is about defending the hard-won gains. But what is there to celebrate at this stage when we are dealing with a crisis such as this? So on the one hand, we are dealing with the capitalist agenda, but at the same time, we cannot ignore the fact that the trust deficit that continues to manifest itself is something that has to be spoken about, because when we look at the proceeds of our productivity that is resulting in the materials and the products that are being produced here, we cannot just be silent partners. There must be an equivalent share each time in order to advance on what the possibilities are to advance on further. But we talk about capitalism on one hand, but we cannot ignore the fact that government also has a role to play in ensuring that it is a proper regulatory environment. And at the same time, when we take a look at the role of government in this continued debate, there has to be policy certainty, because the knock-on effect here is about the deterring of investors in these big mining companies that the conversation is about this morning. So on the one hand, yes, absolutely, there's one debate that must be held, and it is a difficult debate, but a necessary debate to give both workers and employees the kind of certainty that we want to move in a direction that South Africa can consistently be competitive. But we are causing and scoring own goals each time if we do not have the support of government in this instance to provide that assurance in terms of the direction that we should be moving into when it comes to policy certainty, because we can't continue to walk right and talk left. It is not assisting in any such way.
We're going to continue the conversation in a moment. I'll give the opportunity to the AMCU president, Joseph Matunjwa, to also weigh in on this conversation. And I wonder, what is it that unions also believe can be done on the question of jobs, right? What is the biggest threat to workers currently, and how are they responding to that threat? We'll continue the conversation in a moment. It's 11:30.
A very good morning with the news headlines. Analysts believe that politically motivated violence is expected to increase in the lead up to this month's elections. ANC MP Boy Mamabolo says he's launching a new bid in the High Court in Joburg to set aside the Limpopo ANC's national candidates list and the case of 6 men accused of the murder of Kaizer Chiefs defender Luke Fleurs has been postponed yet again. A full news update at midday.
#SFM Talking Point.
We continue the conversation on the talking point. We're speaking to some of the unions in the country and unionists to ask what role can unions play in saving jobs. Joseph Matunjwa is the AMCU president, Rifda Ajam, general secretary of FEDUSA, and Ibrahim Harvey, former COSATU unionist and a political writer and author. So, Mr. Matunjwa, let me then give you a chance to come in here on this conversation. What is it that you think unions could be doing differently to represent the interests of workers in a way that a lot of workers feel accommodated?
Yes, thank you very much. And I think firstly, we need to understand that in terms of Labor Relations Act, Section 200, the Labor Relations Act facilitates the dismissal of workers through misconduct, incapacity and retrenchment. And incapacity and retrenchment are the biggest drivers of job losses. And with all this, the union is not the regulator of these laws. So until such time, we are in the position whereby we can have a political will that is prepared to amend certain sections of the Labor Relations Act. For instance, Section 189, where the companies, if they don't make super profit, they normally retrench people. Where they don't make super profit, they put the mines in care and maintenance. And that is what deceives us. That is what destroying jobs. If the government can be in the position to amend the licensing of the mines, that there will be no mine that will be put on care and maintenance in the expense of the dignity of the workers, or there should be a proper investigation if really is that particular sector or mine is in distress. But all this you cannot do without having a government that has a political will. And secondly, we need also to understand what system are we working within. I mean, South African government is a neoliberal government. It protects neoliberalism. So that's why you find that in every mineral that we extract, we don't put a price on it. We are price takers. The neoliberalism has got this tendency of putting prices and also lowering trade barriers, of which it affects the jobs because it's becoming like a floodgate. Any person can come in the country, sell anything, and compete with the people of South Africa. So all those things, if you can look, the spaza shop, the spaza shop has been taken by Bangladeshis, Somalians, and what about the poor South African? Those are the low-hanging fruits that could assist South Africans.
So, Ibrahim, if I'm to reflect on what both Rifda and Joseph have said, it positions the unions in a position that is largely one of disadvantage because they are responding often to decisions that are coming out of industry and, they don't get to decide that there are going to be retrenchments. Theirs is to say, well, what is it that workers can get out of a retrenchment process? Is there a way to change that? And so if we're asking the question, the role unions can play in saving jobs, is it the role of unions to save jobs?
Right. Cathy, obviously, historically, that's the role. The primary role of trade unions, one of it, would be to defend jobs and you need to fight retrenchment notices and so on. But it's a largely reactive thing. You've got to understand that capitalism, as soon as it hits the crisis, what does it do? It sheds labor. Because the biggest cost factor in the production process is labor. This is a historical global thing. Capitalism in crisis sheds labor. South Africa is worse so because we inherited this ultra-exploitable, cheap black labor policy from the apartheid era, which basically actually continued, after 1994. It continued. And you must remember, don't forget, unemployment was a big problem under apartheid. And contrary to what Ramaphosa and other people have been saying, with all these employment creation projects, we're sitting with the biggest unemployment crisis, Cathy, not just in post-apartheid South Africa, in the entire history of South Africa since the formation of the Union in 1910 or so. This is it, especially black youth unemployment, the worst ever. And Matunja is right, he uses the term neoliberalism, but it's neoliberal capitalism, that is ultimately anything that threatens the profits of the bosses, they retrench labor, Cathy. This is a structural problem that unions, and you mustn't forget, we're down to, what is it now, about just over 3 million workers were in trade unions, down to about 23%. From where it was 28 to 30% about a decade ago. And globally, trade unions also have been in a serious decline for technological changes for decades. So it's a combination of reasons. But don't forget one very big thing. I see there was a reference to the mine employers, etc. The ANC, Cathy, as I've argued many times in many columns, the ANC is betrayed, even Kosatu. The ANC is responsible for this neoliberalism that Matunja speaks about. They inherited the state. They could have did whatever they wanted to with the state. And they went the way they did, as Cathy, I mean, you look at the black townships. Who's that? That's the black working class majority that has been in an unstoppable avalanche of township protests. It's all linked. What happens at the point of production, the factories and the townships are linked. And they were linked during the apartheid struggles. That has been lost, and with it, the level of sacrifice of trade union organizers and officials. I earned 450 rand when I left the union, Cathy, in 1988, 850 rand. Today, the union is still never worked for. You see, they're rather more concerned, the officials, the level of it has just declined, They're more concerned with what they earn than that commitment and sacrifice that we had in the 1980s, Cathy. So it's a combination of reasons, really. But the ANC government, right on top there, believe me, they bear responsibility for the crisis that we face in the country, the attacks on labor, and the unemployment crisis we face.
So Rifta, I mean, part of the challenge then is to say, what kind of impact, given the context, given the environment that Ibrahim has outlined, what kind of impact then do unions have? Because it does sound that they're largely powerless. It does sound like the kind of bargaining power that unions have in this country today can only get them so far.
Cathy, I certainly want to align to many of the frustrations that comes out in Ibrahim's voice. And as I've indicated earlier on, it's a combination of factors. Yes, it's capital that is the driver of many of these instances, and we've seen case law on that front. But at the same time, it's government. The failures, the systemic failures, and absolutely the high levels of unemployment. But we cannot continue to listen and fuel a narrative that says that the unions, number one, are worthless and powerless. We certainly do have a degree of influence, because without a negotiated solution, you cannot have an outcome that is beneficial towards the workers. I've mentioned the trust deficit and the rebuilding of these issues, because COVID showed us that during times of uncertainties, we most certainly can sit around the table. But at the end of the day, we have to understand that even though you want to unlock the conversation of neoliberal policies, how then do you place the blame at the feet of government for failing to deliver on a crisis in the energy sector that is the backbone of the sector that we are dealing with now, which is the mining sector? How then has government failed us as unions when we have dealt with the issues of logistics, those very materials and minerals at the mines for them to be able to get to the ports, for us to continue to retain our levels of competitiveness? And what we cannot underscore is the fact that crime is getting out of control and government is doing absolutely nothing to deal with these issues. 2.5 billion annually is spent towards additional security costs. So if unions are not side by side around the table for these difficult conversations, would members be worse off? Absolutely. We cannot just say that unions are not playing a role in this conversation, because at the end of the day, we've been at the mining in Durban. We've highlighted about many of the issues about either putting in place a moratorium to stop this bloodbath going on, and at the same time we are there to deliver and to contribute towards valuable solutions that can move in the direction, for example, the repurposing of mining towns, and at the same time many of the other aspects that we will contribute. But you can't say that unions are not there. Unions will continue to have negotiated solutions. At the end of the day, there's a plethora of issues in terms of the external dynamics that we cannot ignore. So the societal prejudices are what are fueling these debates, and we have to allow it to be put to rest, failing which it can only go down a further rocky slope. We have to put that conversation to bed. Otherwise, there would have been bloodbaths after bloodbaths if the unions had not stepped in.
All right. So, Rifta, you make the argument then that there is still a very big role that unions play. Mr. Matunja, is the voice of unions still credible in this country?
The voice of AMCO is credible in this country. I cannot speak to other unions. And as AMCO, we have to pay a very heavy price when we were challenging the status quo, the structural economy, how the black workers are paid. Then that there was Marikana, the government of the day, whom we put into power, massacred 34 mine workers, brought in the broad daylight. What they were fighting for economic emancipation. They were fighting what we've been promised, but they paid a heavy price. Even today, no one has been arrested. It took us, after the massacre of Lone Mill massacre, which now is by Stillwater massacre, it took us 5 months, solid strike, to change the status quo, where they were vilifying, mine workers are not educated. What can they do with 12,500? But today, if it was in AMCO, in South Africa, where many other unions saw that the minimum wage of 500 is affordable, vet professors, they even come up with a paper to say Lone Mill can pay even 25,000 rand for each worker. But it took us 5 months to change the status quo. No one supported us except those good Samaritan, good citizens that they saw going. That's why today, as Abraham was saying, Comrade Abraham, we have to form this Labour Party. This Labour Party is the voice of all workers, employed, unemployed, people of South Africa, to have a voice in that parliament. In that parliament, it's only parties that support and protect the status quo of neoliberalism. Now, Sibanye is retrenching over 4,000 workers. Impala Platinum is retrenching over 5,000 workers. Siriti Coal Mine is retrenching over 1,500 workers. Anglo is retrenching over 5,000 workers. BHP Billiton wants Anglo wants to pull out of South Africa. Shell is pulling out of South Africa. 500 stations or pump stations will be closed. All this is because we don't use the material government that got the best out. We are extracting minerals, we are taking out. Until we change the policies that.
All right. Mr. Matunja, it looks like we're losing you on the line there. Difficulty with connection to him. Ibrahim, I'm going to give you the last word then on this conversation. This idea of having a structure that represents all workers, right? And it's important because there are so many workers in this country who don't feel that they necessarily are represented within unions, which is why they don't join unions. But it doesn't mean that they don't have frustrations. It doesn't mean that there are issues that they don't need resolved. What is your answer for the position of those workers?
Working class unity that unites, melds together the three. We still have besides capital and employers and the state, one of the big problems that faces the labor movement in this country is the lack of organizational unity amongst the trade unions, amongst the workers. This is the problem. I mean, you're sitting with COSATU 1.8, Pedusa, I think 550, not to 400,000. This is the big problem. If the workers were united in a single federation, Cathy, there would have been a very different situation. So a key critical task facing trade unions who are in a crisis today, no doubt unprecedented, so deep, is the unity of the working class. And unless, serious moves are made, I've called for this for 2 decades, nothing happens. These 3 trade union federations to act together, they would be raising a struggle from a much stronger platform if the 3 major federations were united, Cathy, and this is a key task facing unions today.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Let me thank all of my guests, Ibrahim Harvey, Rifta Ajam, and Joseph Matunjwa, for your contributions to this conversation. It's a wrap on The Talking Point. Up next, the book reading.
The book reading. Please note the views expressed in this book are not that of the station. Listeners' discretion is advised. SFM presents another episode of Why Men Hate Women, written by Kopano Ratili.
However, because of, for example, the history of global and local racism and racist categorization, too often when thinking about men, we fall into the trap of thinking of Nigerian masculinity as one model or Afrikaner masculinity as a type. On the contrary, there is no one single type of masculinity in any linguistic or ethnic group, nation, or race. What helps us is precisely understanding masculinities as sets of changing configurations rather than fixed types. Such an understanding enables us to see ideas about masculinity as contestable rather than written in stone. Masculinity is about power arrangements among men and between men and women. Men are positioned in relations of power vis-a-vis other men and in relation to women. Masculinities to which men subscribe are also arranged in some kind of order, a hierarchy, as Cornell has also argued. Some masculinities are seen as more desirable, imbued with higher value than others. To contend that masculinity is about power also means that in any society, power determines what is the socially valued masculinity. The form of masculinity that the greater part of a society generally agrees to be desirable, meaning those things the majority sees as defining a socially successful man, is the masculinity that is in power. It is especially the part of society that sets the agenda and direction of that society that has the most influence over what is taken by the majority to be highly valued masculinity. In our society, or part of it, men are or have been regarded as embodying successful manhood when they have gone through initiation and been circumcised in a traditionally accepted way, have money, occupy some position of authority, have cows, have good jobs, can beat other men, drive expensive cars, have sex with the women other men supposedly desire, have sex with more than one woman, own properties, are respected by other men, show a readiness to use violence, and fulfill other measures of manhood of people with adult male bodies. What this implies is that in order to prove we are men, we will seek to possess or demonstrate those attributes that our society believes define manhood. This in turn implies that to understand why some men are violent, we have to recognize how they understand power, which is tied to their understanding of masculinity. One route through which power works is force. The use of violence to enforce the law or to rule over others is an example of this. Another route consists of ideas which are employed to persuade us of the rightness of power or to challenge the powerful. What this means is that the hierarchical order of masculinity in a society, what is dominant and what subordinate, can serve ideological ends, either to support the existing order or to challenge it. When politicians in some countries condemn transgender individuals, what they are doing is using ideas of masculinity for their own political ideological ends. They are trying to shore up their power base by denigrating trans men and women. This is true also for religious figures who preach against women who love other women or men who prefer to have sex with other men. They are using the dominant ideas about what it is to be a woman or a man to reproduce their religio-ideological positions on gender. Since masculinity is made up of patterns of the practice of power, it stands to reason that society, small groups and individuals can change the patterns and can shift the power. This does not imply that it is necessarily easy to do so, but we can. There are always forces at work and individuals who will fight to conserve what has existed before or up to this point, which we refer to as the way things have always been done, or convention, or law, or tradition, even if what has existed harms others. Yet there are always opportunities to change the way things have been done in the past. The beginning of such change lie in appreciating that the things we believe define masculinity are always changing, even if this is happening on the margins of society or is pushed by small groups of people, or if the reality is that it is not all men who will change. Not too long ago, for example, the idea of same-sex marriage was so unthinkable as to be punishable by law. But gay masculinity is now out in the open for some, not all men, and gay marriage is legally acceptable in many parts of the world. Chapter 29. The politician told students, you can't ask for money from somebody who raped you. More than a decade ago, a well-known political figure in South Africa, Julius Malema, said to a crowd of students at the then Cape Peninsula University of Technology, when a woman didn't enjoy it, she leaves early in the morning. Those who had a nice time will wait until the sun comes out, request breakfast, and ask for taxi money. In the morning, that lady requested breakfast and taxi money. You can't ask for money from somebody who raped you. At the time, Malema was the president of the ANC Youth League. His words were in defense of Jacob Zuma, the then president of the mother body, the ANC, who had been accused of raping a woman named in the media only as Kwezi. I do not know what the students learned from that. Was it that there are rules for rape? What Malema was expressing to the university students was an example of a rape myth. A rape myth is a prejudicial, stereotyped or false belief about rape, rape victims, and rapists. Another way to define rape myths is as attitudes and beliefs that are generally false about a widely and persistently held and that serve to deny and justify male sexual aggression against women. These prejudicial beliefs and attitudes function to shame victims of rape, shutting them up. Like many people, I grew up in an environment replete with these harmful stereotypes. Because of current level of sexual violence, I have little reason to believe that there has been a dramatic change in the prevalence and content of rape myths. One of the early works discussing the attitude and belief supporting of rape was Against Our Will, Men, Women and Rape by Susan Brown Miller, published in 1975. The book would go on to influence a large body of research and the thinking of many women and men about how sexist cultural beliefs support rape and thus perpetuate sexual offenses in a society. These beliefs also justify other forms of violence against women. Brown Miller wrote, all women want to be raped. No woman can be raped against her will. She was asking for it. If you're going to be raped, you might as well relax and enjoy it. These are the deadly male myths of rape, the distorted proverbs that govern female sexuality. They are at the heart of our discussion, for they are the beliefs that most men hold, and the nature of male power is such that they have managed to convince many women of their validity. They deliberately obscure the true nature of rape. There are many cultural myths and beliefs about rape. They are very hard to dismantle without deliberate, consistent effort to undo the attitude and beliefs that shape the masculinity many men have introjected, often unconsciously, into their identity. Even when a man has gone some way in extirpating these myths from the self, there is the broader society in which he lives that reinforces them. There are many places where we see society's tolerance of such attitude and beliefs. Although some myths need work to uncover, others are easy to notice. Enumerating some of the myths of which I'm aware in my society, is not, I believe, gratuitous if these harmful stereotypes are to be smashed. Women who visit men at their homes or hotel rooms are signaling that they want it because, unlike men, women are afraid to explicitly express their sexual desires. It is not rape if she does not say no or fight. A person who is about to be raped will scream. Women lie about rape to get back at men. It is not rape if there are no bruises or the perpetrator did not have a weapon. There is a typical behavior of women who have really been raped. Men cannot control themselves. Good men, rich men, handsome men do not need to rape. There is a typical rapist. When a woman accepts favors, money or gifts from a man, she owes him. No does not really mean no because women want to be persuaded. She should not have gotten drunk. She only has herself to blame. Prostitutes cannot be raped. She should have known better than to walk in a dangerous place. She should not have walked alone at that hour. A healthy heterosexual man who says no to sex with a beautiful woman who wants to have sex with him probably cannot keep it up, is secretly gay or has something wrong with him. Real men cannot be raped. It is men who cannot have women who rape. A woman wearing revealing clothes is asking for it. How can you say no if you are my wife? A man wants sex, a woman wants love.